Good evening, I'm Jesse Rogers. Welcome to this special broadcast centered on the Mulembe Nation. Now, the political earthquake on January 23rd, 2022 was the initial part of President William Ruto's dalliance with the Western region, a move that many argue gave fresh impetus to William Ruto's candidacy, tilting the political landscape in the country ahead of the 2022 general election. It was a gamble that paid off in the scramble for the over 2.2 million votes in the Mulembe Nation, as William Ruto hived off a chunk in a region that predominantly supported his main rival, Raila Odinga, for close to 3 decades, even managing the majority of votes in one of the western counties, Bungoma County. Now, fast forward to 2023, the President Ruto's forays in Western region continue. The latest, a 5-day development tour of the region, where apart from the bags of goodies dangled by the head of state, the call for Mulembe Nation to unite and chart a new political future without Raila echoed. So tonight, we seek to find out if Ruto will succeed to wrestle Western from Raila Odinga. And equally, on the sugar politics that is core in the region, will President Ruto succeed where other presidents failed? My esteemed guests are joining me in studio, and they will share their insights on this very important matter touching on Western Kenya. I'm joined by Dr. Martin Olo, who's a political analyst. Asante sana for your time. And equally joined by Dr. Barak Muluka, a political scientist. Mulembe.
Mulembe bwana Martin.
Gentlemen, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you.
Asante sana for your time. How's Emmanuel? Emmanuel, yes.
Is good. As you know, it's where the sun rises before it can go to discover other places and also bless them. So we are fine and blessed.
I hear you're the finest export from Emmanuel.
They are better ones, only they are more silent than I am.
This one is out of date.
But one thing I cannot poke holes into is your knowledge of the Western region. So gentlemen, kindly indulge us as we seek to understand what the latest forays actually mean on the political landscape. Allow us to start with a couple of sentiments from leaders in that particular region. This coming in the backdrop of President William Ruto's 5-day development tour of the region, and equally other leaders, what they have to say about Raila Odinga's relationship with Western Kenya. Listen in.
There's no supremacy battle between Wetangula and Musalia Mudavadi. Weta is the speaker, duly elected. I have been appointed by the president as the prime cabinet secretary. On the executive side, we all have our responsibilities.
Nimesikia watu wengine wakisema ati Wetana Musalia sijui nini. This is my brother. This is my brother.
Rally behind your two leaders for now in the next 3 years. Ndio sasa ndio mtafutie watu wenu, mketi na rais, mkiwa na nguvu, mkiwa wengi.
Mimi nikija hapa narudi nyumbani. Sime narudi nyumbani. Kuna mtu anaanza kunizuia kwenda nyumbani. Mimi ni kijana wa Ingo.
Tatembea pamoja hiyo safari. Ama mnasemaje? Kabisa. Kabisa. Si mimi niliwaambia hawa jamaa hawezi kunishinda.
People of Bungoma, my relatives, my friends, my sisters, my brothers, let us be united and let us make sure that the government of William Samoei Ruto will be extremely solid so that come 2027, we are able to move ahead without any hiccup.
Tumehangaika huku 2013, 2017, sasa mambo namna gani? We are having the last laugh. He who laughs last loves the best, loves the longest.
Hakuna mwaka wa 2027 mtu akwambie atatoa huyu bwana ni ngumu, na ndio maneno bwana Musalia alikuwa anawauliza. Yeye tulijaribu kumweka nje. Alipita kwa sisi kama mtu anapita kwa shamba ile haina mai.
Interesting. So he who laughs last laughs best. So, Martin Olo, I'd like to begin with you and perhaps setting a historical perspective to the Mulembe nation, because this region wholeheartedly supported Raila for close to 3 decades, starting with his stab at the presidency, unsuccessful in 1997, 2007, 2013, 2017, and 2022. So perhaps it would be proper to understand how exactly this dalliance came about and how did Raila manage to maintain this region for close to 3 decades? Was his efficiency based on the foot soldiers he had?
Not exactly. I think what we need to understand is how the Western Bloc votes, or the Western nation votes.
Yes.
And to say that Raila has always had a full handle on it is perhaps mischaracterization. There is this section that Raila has always had, but there's this other section that he's never had, and that's the Bungoma side of it. So the Bungoma side of it has always voted one way, when the rest of Western votes this other side. So when you look at Mwai Kibaki's days, look at the Kanu days, look at the the opposition days, you see that Bungoma has always voted one way. So has Raila ever had Bungoma in his place? No. The only time that Raila and perhaps the rest of the country had Bungoma was on its side is when NAC went into power. That's when Wamalo Kijana was in place, Mudia Warrior was on the other side, joined into LDP, joined with Mwai Kibaki, and eventually went into government. That's the first thing. The second thing is, Western has always voted in such a way that one leg is inside government, another leg is outside government. So they've always loved hanging around power. And as you see, both in terms of what Wetangula is saying and Musalia is saying, that they had their own journey away from government for rather long, and they wanted to find a way back.
Yeah.
So now that they're back in government, you can be sure that going forward, it's about how do you remain in government. So that then will define whether Raila is able to continue having a hold, or his hands will slip and some of his strongholds will actually slip away. Certainly that equation is on, and that's why you can see this attention of the Mulembe nation.
Interesting. Dr. Muluka, as you come in and equally speak about the historical lineage between these leaders and the region, if I take you back to March 2018 in the Senate, where Moses Wetangula was actually removed as the Senate Majority Leader, he said a couple of words that are etched in my memory. It will be noisy, it will be messy, and there will be casualties. So at the end of the day, was this the beginning of Raila's perhaps waning support in the region?
Thank you. Allow me, first of all, to observe that the motion is wrongly phrased. When we talk about, as I've seen the tagline on Ruto's Dalliance with Mulembe nation. As a linguist, I work with words, and words have value. Dalliance conjures up the image of a rather frivolous and flirtatious kind of relationship with nothing serious really informing it. It is kind of a rootless sort of romance, and therefore I will not travel with that particular idiom. I think it is a search for engagement. That is more like it.
Okay.
But you correctly observe, and I want to actually agree with my brother Martin here, that there is a sense in which we misrepresent Mr. Odinga's engagement with that community. I would even take it a little bit further back and look at what he inherited from his father, who in 1992 actually had Bungoma. Yeah, and that's how come you have got Ford Kenya still dominating Bungoma, because it did vote at that time for Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. You'll remember there was President Moi, there was Mwai Kibaki, there was Ken Matiba, and there was Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. And each one of these four leaders had quite a sizable chunk of Western Kenya, the Mulembe nation, but also roping in the Teso and the Elgon Maasai. You have got to look at that region within that broad context. Straight to the point, if I may shoot straight like an arrow. Yes, there have been consequences. It was noisy, it was messy, and there has always, since 2022 January, been this feeling that whichever side Musalia Mudavadi and Moses Wetangula were going to go in the presidential election in that year, that side was going to win that election. It did not matter that they brought on board very big or very small numbers. The election was very narrowly won, and therefore it is around personalities and political parties that were led by Musalia Mudavadi, Moses Wetangula, people like Amason Kingi, Alfred Mutua, those who are deserting the Azimio environment at the 11th hour, that tipped off the balance, and therefore, in a sense, it contributed very significantly to the victory or to the loss, howsoever one wants to look at it.
Okay, interesting. So to the present now, Martin, and at the end of the day, politics is about people and economic empowerment. So looking at the results from the region in the 2022 election, Raila garnering 60.6% from the region against Ruto's 32.2%. And we've seen Ruto's aggressive tours ever since the election was concluded. His overtures in endearing both Raila's men, those who lost, and those who were successful in the general election. What would you say about him being successful in trying to wrestle that region from Raila as it is right now? Because, yeah.
The issue here is that one leader is gaining traction and another leader is losing traction. For a long time, Raila has been having traction. And perhaps Raila has had politics that have been able to galvanize proper sections of the country. But Ruto is a good student of Raila as well. Ruto is a good student of Moi as well. And when he needed both Wetangula and Musalia was because he was an outsider, a kind of a pariah, wanting some form of Kenyan face. So attracting the likes of Wetangula was important for him. Attracting the likes of Kingi was important. At least it was a semblance of the fact that he was also getting other people. He is in government today. He has the machinery and he has the political strategy and the pass as well with him. Now he is going to definitely maintain and increase numbers. The problem is on the opposition side. The problem is on the Raila side, that he is having to lose grip and therefore numbers are going to slip. So what am I saying? The flip is going to happen. So that's the reality that we're dealing with. Okay. You deal with a man with power in a way that you need to appreciate that this is not Uhuru in power. This is somebody who knows what to do with the power, somebody who knows the power game, somebody who puts his money where his mouth is, and somebody who loves politics. So really, you saw, he sat in Western and he was going for the common person himself. He was in markets, he was in villages, and that is what the African leader is about. Present with people, handshaking and caring enough about them. Now, where did Baba go and do handshakes and those kind of things? So basically what you're saying is that there is a political shift here, which we need to come to terms with. And so it's not going to be business as usual.
What do you credit Ruto's success in terms of wrestling regions from the kingpins? Because if we go back in history, was he successful in wrestling the Rift Valley region from Moi family? I think he was. Going to perhaps what we're talking about right now, he's mentioned the scale has tilted. Equally, if we look at Gema region, was he successful in wrestling it from Uhuru? Many argue that he was. So what do you attribute his success, and will it play a big part in wrestling this region from Raila?
Thank you. I think President William Ruto brings a number of assets to the political arena. He comes on board as a very sharp mind. He's got the political acumen. He's able to read the lay of the land very accurately. He knows where to spend his energy. He knows what is called his base. He knows how to disaggregate the electorate into three critical parts. What you'd call the hardcore areas, what you would call his base, and what you would call the neutral grounds, the swing zones.
Yeah.
And he knows how to get his opponents away from their own base, send it to sleep, keep them in the hardcore areas, laboring in vain, while he is taking the swing vote areas and also keeping his own area galvanized. He also knows how to identify and work with other kingpins. You see, it's of interest that some of the people that eventually ended up with Dr. William Ruto were people who until fairly recently had been even lampooning them. But he made sure that at no time did he antagonize himself with them. And when push came to shove, he was able to swing them to his side. He also has this ability to identify people felt needs and to speak to them and to speak language that people understand in terms of what their felt needs are, and which is a factor of his upbringing, where he came from, his heritage, hence his ability to position such a narrative as the hustlers versus the dynasties. I think the conversation was around that kind of contestation, which worked very well in the past. Where he is now is the moment of the test of the pudding, because it's no longer going to be about speaking to the right subject. It's going to be acting to the right subject, and I think there's a sense in which he's already aware of that. And as we talk about him making inroads into Western, we must not forget that there's every effort to also make inroads into Nyanza, including Luo Nyanza, which he is visiting repeatedly. And I think at the back of his mind, he's conscious of the fact that he's never going to snatch Luo Nyanza from Raila Odinga, but he's conscious of the fact that whatever little gain he makes in that space is going to have its significance at the end of the day. So you've got to talk about those various assets that he brings into the political arena.
So ilo wanasema haba na haba ujaza kibaba. Interesting. So Olo, as you come in, this dangling of the development card, we've seen it time and time again. William Ruto is not the first president to perhaps approach Mulembe Nation with it, what will be the impact of the carrot and the stick approach from where you sit?
You see, these empty promises or these paternalistic promises are critical in terms of galvanizing numbers.
Okay.
You see, our people, you know, our people have this mentality about the state, and they believe that the state comes with legis and goodies. So there is this notion that if you are told you'll get a road, that's development. When you know that you don't have a vehicle, you don't even have a business that requires that road, and then you are told that we shall revive the factories, when you know for sure that even when the factories are working, the labor that is actually coming to build I mean, the employment is actually external. So basically, what you are witnessing is a perfection of how to play around with the psychology of the hoi polloi, and they come along. And they attract, you get the praises that come with it. So development in quotes, or development as we know it, or as promised by politicians, is an empty shell. The reality is that the interest is political. The vote. Will we? I mean, look at how the deputy president speaks. He has no idea. He has no issue about what is happening now. Even he's talking about 2027 after this. So the agenda is there, not here. So anything else in between, it's a game of chess. We can promise this, we can push that. At the end of the day, what we need to accept is that development doesn't happen because the state is offering it. Development happens because one is a right, a constitutional right, and it is a human thing that once you are born in Kenya, you deserve certain services, health, education, and so on. So that was, nobody should come and promise you, you deserve them because you are Kenyan. However, for political reasons, you would think that it is something that if you are given today, it could be taken away if you don't do the right thing, which itself is incorrect, because once people make choices, they should not be condemned. They should not be victimized of those choices. And people should not be induced or incentivized to make choices that they would otherwise not make just because you are dangling a carrot before them. So they are empty, and they just remain that.
Okay. But look, as you come in, talk is cheap. So you mentioned he has to walk the talk right now. But wouldn't it be a double-edged sword if perhaps these are simply empty promises? And with 2027 coming closer and closer, it'll definitely be high time for him to implement these promises ahead of the election. Well, what do you make? Talking big, will it be a boomerang that will come back and perhaps hit him on the head eventually?
You know, this is where our paths with my brother, Dr. Martin Olo, part. That is where we part ways.
Yes.
And I'd like to preface the rest of my remarks behind the thought that politics is about looking for political power. It's about the search for power. It's about finding that power. It's about consolidating and seeking to keep that power. And it is about exercising that power if you are in government. And if you are in the opposition, you keep on searching until such a day as you are going to get it, and then you will also seek to consolidate, to then keep it, and to continue seeking to keep yourself in that place. Okay. The thing which is called development, and I want to think more about sustainable human development, because there are many indices of development. You can talk about a human index. You can talk about an economic development index that does not sustainably talk about the people. For example, in slave economies, you can talk about very huge national domestic product. You can talk about massive per capita But when you come to the actual distribution and you look at the people, they are not part of the equation. And therefore, we are talking about community felt needs, people felt needs. And if you are going to include the people, those whom Dr. Olo calls the holoi polloi, into the growth, into the development, then the road justifies itself. That if you are producing milk somewhere, you need to get it to the markets. You need market linkages, and the road will come in, it will justify itself. It doesn't matter that you don't have a car. In fact, from where I sit, I would be happy not to bother myself with driving cars if I had a functional public transport system with good functional road networks, with good functional railroads, with good underground systems. Okay. There is a way in which I am involved, regardless that I am self-propelled or that I am buying a ticket onto something. Mm-hmm. These things which we talk about, sugar and sugarcane, and I know that you intend to come to that more substantively. Sure. And my younger brother, Dr. Martin Olo, was already born and fairly mature in the heyday of the Mumias Sugar Company, okay, what we used to call Bukas. And it is true that Mumias transformed not just the economy of Wangaland, where my brother Dr. Martin Olo comes from, but the entire Kakamega district those days and the entirety of that West Kenya belt rolled into one within the yam and with pan pepper sugar mills, okay, and pepper mills rather, pan pepper pepper mills in Webuye, as well as a number of fledgling tea factories in Mudete, Kaimosi, wherever. They were able to shoe up the economy of that region. Okay. People were able to produce even if they did not add value. They were able to take their children to school. They were able to contribute to Harambes that built schools and, okay, built hospitals. Okay. It was a self-perpetuating and a self-sustaining blossoming and expansion of the economic space. So I think those are some of the things that I have seen President William Ruto going with to Western. Okay. What kind of traction they're going to take is something we have to wait until the proper
when we come to the sugar, I would like to deal with this issue.
Audit moment comes. Okay. He knows very well that they even bought bicycles.
No, those were before sugar cane.
Okay. So gentlemen, we're jumping the gun. We need to take a short break. As we come back, we'll come back with the bittersweet sugar politics. Yes. And asking the question, will President Ruto succeed where his predecessors have failed? Because we've seen previous presidents pump money into the sugar sector, but unfortunately the farmer at the end of the day is not positively affected in one way or the other. Allow us to take a short break. We'll be back with our interrogation around courting Mulembe Nation. Do stay with us.
KTN News. Get the whole story.
Mortin Doom, with its trusted formulation, it provides protection in seconds. So spread the Mortin Doom message of how you and I can fight to end malaria.
Mortin Doom, Kenya's #1 choice.
Jig cleans and kills 99.9% of illness-causing germs and COVID-19 in your home. Jig, your family's guardian against germs and COVID-19.
Today we're on Happy Kenya Clean Toilet Mission. And you're visiting Mama Zawadi live in Nairobi. Come with me.
Selena!
Mama Zawadi, how do you keep your toilets clean?
I use normal detergent and bleach for washing.
The detergent and bleach cleanless can leave behind yellowness, rust, and germs. Harpic's 10 times better cleaning compared to regular detergents and bleach. And kills 99.9% illness-causing germs in your toilet, including the COVID-19 virus.
Wow, Selena! Nimeamini sasa!
Really?
Yes!
Now that she's part of the mission, the next house is yours.
Colgate Herbal is formulated from a unique blend of natural herbs and is scientifically proven to strengthen teeth and keep gums healthy. Try Colgate Herbal, scientifically proven for strong teeth and healthy gums.
There are quite a few people who pretend that they will never read the new Nairobian newspaper. But you and I know very well that they all do. The new Nairobian, out every Friday. Nothing stays hidden.
Africa Speaks, a groundbreaking show that brings you the beauty, diversity, and untold stories of Africa like never before. From the sprawling savannas to the bustling cities, from ancient traditions to modern innovations, Africa Speaks captures the essence of this magnificent continent done by Africans from an African perspective. Journey with us to the continent's tourist attraction and historical sites through Destination Africa. Learn from our ancestors' wise words on Proverb of the Day. Africa Speaks, where the voice of Africa echoes around the world.
You are watching KTN News.
Tonight, the government signs a collective bargaining agreement with the Union of Civil Servants to end disparities in the remuneration structure in the public service. The National Dialogue Committee to convene next week to begin talks after receiving 142 memorandums from the public on the 5 broader issues for talks between Kenya Kwanza and Azimio. Plus, stakeholders raise a red flag as it emerges that tobacco is the most abused substance among primary school-going pupils in the country. And construction of the stalled multi-billion shillings dams projects, including Itare, Aror and Kimorer, set to resume before the end of this year.
KTN News. Get the whole story.
Of institutions. You're watching our analysis of the latest forays around Western Kenya, all about courting Mulembe Nation. And we just want to shift focus briefly because the politics of Western Kenya goes hand in hand with the sugar sector. A lot of promises have been made by political leaders around resuscitating the ailing sugar sector, but little so far has been done. President William Ruto has taken on this challenge. Will he succeed? Only time will tell. But let's listen in to some of the insights shared by leaders touching on the sugar sector in the region.
Hakuna kesi tuta entertain hapo. Kesi watoe na wao wenyewe watoke. Nyinyi mnanielewa? Tunaelewana? Na nimewaambia mambo ni mangapi? matatu. Wakitaka kuniletea kisirani, either wahame Kenya, ama nitawaweka jela, ama wasafiri waende mbinguni.
Sisi wa Western Region, we want to appreciate msimamo ambao umetoa kwa sugar industry zetu by waiving all the debts, almost 100 billion Kenya shillings.
All those county governments napanda miwa paka Nzoia, governors wakae chini wa form one company, and then they go to Mauritius, a very small country ambayo ina depend on cane. Waulize na government, president atawasaidia kama garanta kupata experts. Muache ubinafsi, selfish. One company from South Nyanza, Migori, mpaka huku ya miwa peke yake. You build big things.
How can the private mills be functioning profitably na mills ya serikali iko kwa madeni? There must be a management issue. So we will sort that out and we will agree on the formula that will take us forward. Kampuni yetu ya Nzoia hapa, kampuni ya Mumias, ile ya Sony, ile ya Miwani, ile ya Mohoroni, ile ya Chemelil, hizo kampuni zote tutahakikisha kwamba tumezipangia vizuri.
I'm still in studio with Dr. Martin Olo and Dr. Barak Muluka as we continue evaluating the bittersweet sugar sector. So, Olo, let's start with perhaps reflecting on what the president has said in the last 2 or 3 weeks. Mambo ni Matatu, it's definitely attracted the negative sentiments from various civil sector bodies, LSK, you name it. But others regard that this approach is what's needed for him to succeed where President Mwai Kibaki failed, former president rather, and former President Uhuru Kenyatta failed. We know talk is cheap, but will he succeed in rooting out the sugar cartels? We've heard of sugar barons and those deeply rooted sugar importers.
You know, Jesse, I have a real problem. And on this one, I don't agree with my president. The reason why we have the rule of law is so that in the event of any disagreements, let the law take its course. If anybody is aggrieved, they should be free to go to court. No Kenyan can be taken out of this country to which other country? Which other country wants a Kenyan? And no Kenyan should go to jail for a mistake they have not committed and for which a due process has not been followed. And no Kenyan will die unless God says so. And shouldn't die because the head of state says so. So on that one, I disagree. Having said that, let us go back to the genesis of the sugar case, the cases in Mumias. The cases in Mumias were brought because KCB, the bank, wanting its debts paid, went to court to protect its interests, and that's how Mumias went into receivership. So KCB went to court. What did the court do? Appoint a receiver manager on behalf of. Now, when there was an opportunity to get somebody to come and resuscitate the company, what happened? Bids were called for. As to what happened between the various bidders and the politics that could have been played, if an investor was found. Which investor happens to be a brother of another sugarcane investor in Western. So what fights come up? Brother, siblings fighting among themselves and using the court system. So which one do you want to take out? The one who started the case or the one who was invited to invest? So that is a zero-sum game. But having said that, let's go back to the sugar sector. Chemelil, Mohoroni have been ailing for a long time. In fact, I don't know whether we're talking about an economy worth talking about because of Chemelil, Mohoroni. For a long time, and I like what my brother was saying, that Mumias sugar since 1970 has been something to talk about. But when I look at Mumias area and I look at generally Western Kenya, I see people who have become wealthy because they were transporters, but they were not from Western Kenya. The guys transporting Kenya were never from Western Kenya. I see people who have become rich because they were sugar transporters with big lorries bringing in. They are not from Western Kenya. I see people who have become rich because whenever money came into Mumias area, it immediately took a flight through a net import of food, a net import of vegetables, net import of maize. So when you tell me that the area has been better because of the sugar, I need to see the data. But the critical issue that I want to put on the table is that the model of sugar is wrong. It's not management. I disagree again with the president.
It's not poor management.
It's not poor management. It means the model. In 1970, and I want to remind my brother here, the contract that the farmer signed with Mumias Sugar remained the contract all the way up to the collapse of Mumias Sugar, a contract that was signed in a controlled economy. So what's happening with this sugar cane? The farmer is a net loser. Why? The seed is brought by the company, and the company determines the price of the seed. The plowing is done by the company, and the company determines the cost of plowing. The fertilizer is brought by the company at a cost, and the interest rate is paid the farmer, and the company is the one that determines the cost of that fertilizer and the interest on it. The cutting of cane is done at the behest of the company, and the company is the one that pays who cuts it. The transportation is determined by the company, including the price per ton. The company says we shall now buy at 3,500. And then when the sugar has been, when the sugar has now been, processed,
yep,
the market determines, and the company determines the price of the end product. What kind of business is that? You have even a farmer who has chicken determines the price of the chicken when he goes to the market. But here is a farmer who is a net loser throughout. So the model of sugarcane farming is a zero-sum game. You can forgive the debts, but who are you forgiving anyway? Most of these debts belong to these sugar barons and people who had done business with mere sugar. The money that will go to a farmer eventually is a paltry. Lastly, if you look at the entire Western Belt now, in order to grow sugar sustainably, you need sizable pieces of land. In a majority of areas, these pieces of land have since been demarcated, divided, subdivided, to a point where farming cane on a half an acre, a quarter an acre is not profitable.
Yeah.
Lastly, for me, if I farmed on a quarter an acre, horticulture, tomatoes, I put just a few little things, I'll make more money than a farmer who is on 3 acres and who has to wait for 24 months to harvest cane. It's a zero-sum game. It's not worth telling anybody that there's an economy there.
Muluka, I can see your facial expressions on that. Kindly jive in.
Has given us a wide matrix of things in which eventually the central argument kills itself. It eats itself up. Because if you are looking at an institution like a sugar company, which does all these things that my brother Dr. Martin Olo has spoken about, then you would probably expect to see the kind of sugar plantations and sugar factories and economies that were seen in South America and in the islands at the apogee of the sugar economy, when a place like Haiti, for example, was at the acme of its fortunes. Think of this factory which has exploited the farmer in this manner that has been described, and then it still collapses. What is the problem? You would be expecting that if it has really done all those things and left behind, and which I do not deny, an impoverished farmer, then it should have something to show for itself that and then we made all these billions. But those billions are not there. What are there are negative billions. So it's at once a question of management, a question of leadership, I would add to what has been talked about. When you look at the model, the right or wrong model it is always a factor of management and leadership, because the leadership has got the visionary agenda, the visionary thrust, that then decides that this is the model that we want. Models don't just drop from the skies. Models are processed in boardrooms. Models are then sold to shareholders and to other stakeholders who then become part and parcel. And I do agree that the model is completely wrong.
Okay.
Perhaps it should not even be a model that looks at cane sugar as the product that we are looking for. It perhaps should be a model that looks at the cane sugar that we produce as a byproduct of what we eventually want to achieve. It should be a model that is perhaps looking at gasoline as the kind of main product, and the rest of these things being byproducts. But then you get to, I said leadership, to add on to management. Leadership in the sense that you find even the political leadership within the sugar belt being part of their problem. You find some of them have become the suppliers, some of them have become the transporters that my brother Martin is talking about here, that they are compromised and mired in the quagmire of conflict, of interest, when they should be the custodians of the people's interests, the watchdogs for society. They lose that role. They cannot speak about it. They even become some of the connivers who, because of the things which my brother has so ably said, only I'm disappointed that he killed the argument towards the end, the tail end of it.
You supported me. You said the leaders are stealing from it.
Yeah, of course I say you drove it well, but you sort of, you're like a good dribbler who gets before the goal mouth and then
the fact that the point made is that it's a loss-making enterprise. And Chemelil, Mohoroni, just look at sugar industry generally.
But they're saying the state-owned ones are the ones that are running in losses.
That's where the model is an issue, because when you look at Kabras or you look at West Kenya,
Dr. Oloro, be of good comportment. Allow me to do what you didn't do by placing the ball in the net. That the cost of production of sugar per unit of whatever it is becomes extremely expensive, and the darn thing, even when the factories are not crushing cane, they are still packaging sugar. So they are importing cheaper sugar from elsewhere and packaging it and branding it and selling it to us astronomically. But the truth of the matter is that people are compromised. Those who should be protecting our interests have become part of the cartels. And those cartels must be dealt with.
Three ways. I like what you say.
As we finalize, our time is up, gentlemen. Final comments.
It's not the one packaging sugar.
Cartels,
some cartels in Nairobi
must be dealt with. If the law to transfer them does not exist, then we must enact that law so that within the ambit of the law, we deal with the cartels.
Okay, well noted. Gentlemen, we have to finalize at this point, but quick question off the cuff, because that's the theme of this whole show, and some of the stories we'll be running during our 9 p.m. broadcast. We'll be seeking to ask this question and answer it as well. So do you believe Ruto will succeed in wrestling Mulembe Nation from Raila Odinga? Briefly.
The answer is yes. The answer is yes. The answer is yes. What we need to agree is that Mulembe Nation is not in the hands of Raila. What you should be asking, are people in Western Kenya going to be better because of Ruto? And I'm saying, not necessarily. The politics will be better for those who are politicking.
All right.
Are the people in Western Kenya's economy going to be better? The issue I was dealing with about policy, the sugar policy,
Okay.
is the issue.
Okay.
When you look at what's happening on the coffee sector, they are dealing with the policy.
All right.
But
all right.
in the sugar, you're being told debts and whatnot.
Okay,
No.
Gentlemen, unfortunately our time is up. Of course, this is a conversation
When
that we cannot...
come back, I will start.
Great, no problem. We'll do just that. I hope you're not pointing to the fact that I've done you injustice.
No problem, it's
great.
okay.
Dr. Barak Muluka, thanks for your time. Always a pleasure. Dr. Martin Olo, always a pleasure as well. Well, we continue with this coverage centered on the Mulembe Nation, equally in our broadcast coming your way. In just but a few minutes, my colleague Ashley Mazuri is locked and loaded to bring you the latest developments happening in the country and not just in the Mulembe Nation. My name is Jesse Rogers. Enjoy the rest of your viewing.